Hello, and welcome to today's WTA webinar. This is a webinar presented by WTA's Technology Advisory Board on growth opportunities in satellite cellular integration. My name is Randall Barney. I'm the Director of Certification and Membership for WTA. I'm joined today by Robert Bell, who is Executive Director for the association. What we do every day is advocate for the interests of teleport operators, as well as promoting the excellence in their operations, their technology, and their business practices. Our webinar today is based on a report that is available on our website of the same title, and we'll be talking about that in just a minute. The Technology Advisory Board was formed to address the rising challenges and opportunities that our leading members feel are really changing the nature of the game. The purpose of the board is to give them guidance. What are the most important advances you need to keep your eye on? What are some of the appropriate technologies for the kind of needs you have? Membership of the advisory board is open to industry patron and leader members. If you want more information on this, send me an email at rbarney@worldteleport.org. Today's agenda. After this introduction, we're going to cover some key insights, or rather Robert will be covering some key insights from the published report, and then we'll launch into a discussion with today's panelists. I would also like to thank our industry leader members who make possible our research reports and webinars. They are Eutelsat, Intelsat, Kratos, Liquid Intelligent Technologies, and SES. I'll now turn this over to Robert Bell, who will discuss the key takeaways from the report. Robert?
Thank you, Randall. Thank you very much. And yes, thanks to our industry leader and industry patron members. They do make a lot possible. I don't know if any of you saw in today's via satellite email, depends what time of the day it is for you, very nice interview with Scott Mumford of Liquid Intelligent Technologies. He's also on our board, and he's a really, really smart guy. So he had some things to say about the cellular backhaul market, actually, that I had not thought about. So well worth reading. Okay, takeaways from the report. This is just a short introduction to a much lengthier and more involved discussion. The first takeaway is, I guess it's not going to be terribly surprising, mobile networks are adopting more satellite-friendly standards. And that's the good news, right? We're actually, satellites beginning to play the game the way the mobile operators want us to play the game, as opposed to scrambling to try to keep up with the technology changes that they're making. And also some of the technology companies in our business, and they're a huge contributor on the ground. I don't think they get enough credit for the changes going on, but they've made significant progress in dealing with the latency-related compatibility issues, right, that are inevitable certainly in GEO and to some extent in MEO, and well, LEO, we'll find out. A huge factor going on right now, which is a big positive, is declining bandwidth prices, right? And again, this is not just something happening in space, it's happening on the ground because of the bandwidth sharing technologies that have been pioneered over the last, 10, 12 years. That accumulated technology investment has begun really to pay off. And also, of course, the high throughput satellite architecture has taken what used to be a very expensive proposition, trying to go point to point on a big global or semi-global beam down into a particular small beam, reaching a service area that you actually care about. So that's letting more and more mobile operators close that business case for satellite backhaul. And it's really been kind of amazing. I mean, in some cases, according to the people I talk to, the cost per megabyte is getting down, or gigabyte is getting down into the zone where it's, it's on the edge of getting competitive. It's $3 a gigabyte, for instance, is kind of the demarc line for mobile carriers to look at this as just a purely business proposition. And we're getting there, which is amazing. And it bodes for a good future. Another underlying development that's going on has to do with virtualization and the related data technologies, and that's in the news a lot, as well it deserves to be. The entire rest of the telecom industry has been virtualizing things, and the IT industry has been virtualizing things for a very long time. And as we move into that world and discover that we can sell into it more effectively, the whole industry is going there as well. So that's opening up a lot of new opportunities, especially in remote areas of the world where you don't want to put a lot of infrastructure in. You want to virtualize as much as you can. You want to put as much software onto commodity hardware as possible to control your costs. So that's, again, a very, very positive sign for our industry. And finally, of course, we have this, we're all counting ultimately on 5G being successful. And it already actually, apparently, at least on paper, is the most successful and quickly adopted mobile standard in the world, even though most of us really don't touch it, doesn't touch our lives yet. So I haven't been able to square that circle. But as obviously, as that comes on and 5G, as defined by the 3GPP organization, really incorporates satellite-friendly standards, you're going to see deeper and deeper integration. The big question mark for all of us is, how far can it go? It doesn't have to go very far to make a huge difference, because satellite is cellular backhaul is a really big market for satellite, and satellite backhaul is a really insignificantly small segment of total backhaul. So you can gain a couple percent and see our market, double, triple in size. I think that's out there, and it's coming a lot sooner perhaps than we might ever have thought a few years ago. So to know more, you can take a look at the executive summary, which is actually pretty similar to this, frankly, or go ahead and download our report free if you're a WTA member, and modestly priced if you're not. So today we have a great panel to talk to you about this in order. No particular order now that I look at it. We have Ronald Bush, who is the Executive Vice President of Engineering and Operations at ABS Global. Ron is also a member of WTA's Board of Directors. So Ron, welcome.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for having me.
Joining him is Mike DiPaolo, who is Director of Business Development and Product Lifecycle Management at the technology company Spacebridge, which has really been on a tear in terms of introducing new products and services. So welcome, Mike.
Thank you very much.
Joining him as well is Germán Perez, who is the product and solutions designer at Access Networks, that kind of unique company that's both European and Latin American. And welcome, Germán.
Thank you.
And finally, and by no means least, Richard Sward, who is Senior Vice President for Premium Enterprise and Mobile Operators at Comtech Satellite Network Technologies, another company that's been making a lot of news recently. And turns out hi there. The husband of a good friend of mine is now your boss, Richard. So good luck. And so now let us step forward into this whole thing. I'd just like to start by asking each of the panelists to briefly introduce themselves and their companies as they relate to today's topic. And Germán, perhaps we'll start with you because you're left hand on my screen.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, and hello everyone. I work for a large integrator in Latin America called Access, now acquired by Hispasat Group. I work on business development for LATAM, and I'm in charge of lead the design solution team, where we design the whole solutions for the big projects through holistic side. Access has presence in many countries of Americas, Africa, Middle East, Europe, and currently is the leader of cellular backhaul solutions through satellite in the region of Latin America, with a huge integration of MNOs and vendors homologated. At Access, operating 24 satellites to our more than 10K sites in 42 countries through GEO, 5 links for point-to-point through MEO fleet. And the number of dedicated capacities for the whole fleet is about 6,000 megahertz, or the same is 6 gigahertz. So just in Americas, Access operates services for 10 MNOs and 3 MVNOs from 2G to 5G technologies, and from 20 megs per site to 1.2 gigabits, this one in MEO fleet, right? On behalf of myself, and Access, we thank the WTA for inviting us, and all the attendees for the receiving and joining us for this event.
Well, thank you. And I knew you were big. I didn't know you were quite that big. So in cellular backhaul. So thank you. Richard, why don't we hear from you next?
Hey. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. So Comtech Satellite Technologies is a technology provider consisting of several brands well known to many of the service providers and operators around the world. Comtech EF Data hosts our SEPC modem line, as well as power amplifiers used a lot for cellular backhaul around the world. We also have SciComm that provides high powered TWTAs and SSPAs for the teleport side of the business. And then we have Memotech that is providing solutions that helps with optimizing traffic in cellular networks, and also do link bonding to make those trunking links a little bit larger across several transponders. And then we have UHB that is a very efficient and successful player in the TDMA backhaul market space. And we marry that with the Heights networking platform and to provide the higher throughput backhaul. And we joined them into the Elevate platform that is able to cater for all the demands from the small ultra rural sites to the medium sites to the high throughput sites anywhere in the world. And we've been in this market for well over 20 years and have a leading position with many customers around the world. And happy to share some more of those stories with you here today.
Well, thank you, Richard. And once again, your description is a great example of the fact that once a brand name is established in the market, people will go on using it 15 years after it no longer exists.
Indeed.
Ron, could we hear from you, please?
Sure. Right. I'm Ron Bush. I'm Executive Vice President of Engineering Operations at ABS Global. I'm basically responsible for engineering operations of ABS's complete ground system globally. We do have 5 satellites that cover the globe minus North America. It's a tough market to get into, so we've decided not to go there at this point. We have business obviously everywhere else in the world. I also have responsibility for pre-sales engineering, capacity management, and also the satellite fleet operations. People like to say I have everything but HR and legal and sales, and that's about it. But it's anything that's going on with it, in ABS with all our customers, we do go down, somewhat down the value chain, and so we do get into obviously the cellular backhaul, data trunking, et cetera, the typical video. We have a lot of customers. I would say probably almost half our revenue is based on data, with the internet trunking probably half of that. And it's only growing. And of course, as everything becomes data, we expect this to grow even more. So thank you for inviting me on the panel.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's yeah, it's a funny world, isn't it? And finally, but last but by no means least, we have Mike DiPaolo, who's joining us from SpaceBridge. Mike, you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and the company?
Sure. As you read, I'm a director in charge of product line management and business development at SpaceBridge. And firstly, I'd like to thank you for hosting this panel. This is great. It's always great to get in front of people and communicate. But about SpaceBridge, well, we're more than just a ground equipment manufacturer. Of course, we provide SCPC, RCS, TDMA solutions, but we have a very rich and experienced staff, and so that allows us to actually act and perform services above and beyond just providing ground equipment. We're really position ourselves as broadband satellite communication system experts. And in that capacity, we really we provide best-in-class solutions for broadband connectivity for a variety of different industries. That includes tactical, civil air defense, or actual defense services. Cellular backhaul is one of the niches, of course, that we play in, and or just straightforward broadband connectivity. So we play in that industry significantly, and we have a large number of deployed hubs and services across many service providers around the world.
Thank you very much. Yes, thank you very much. And I appreciate it. That's something that's happening so much in our industry. Everybody's got to become a systems integrator because the systems become so complex, and they'll only deliver their value if you get the integration right. So that's become a huge trend. Okay, so you can see we have the perfect panel to talk about this issue. We have a service provider, we have a couple of technology providers, very innovative, and we have a satellite operator that's got to ultimately, at the end of the day, close the link to make this all work. So let's just start with the basics here. and this is really a question for anybody who wants to grab it, and we'll get some other points of view too. What, if you're a service provider in this market, what are the basic technology and operational requirements to offer cellular backhaul over satellite? Who would like to take that?
I can take a stab at it, and I'd like to say that satellite backhaul has become a lot easier to do over the years, and I think that's highlighted pretty well in the report as well, talking through the different generations of technologies and how they apply and work over satellite. And as long as you today can provide low latency and decent jitter, you're in good position to meet all the KPIs an MNO requires. 3G was the most challenging standard when it comes to jitter and delay variation, but LTE is a lot more forgiving, and that's a lot of what is going on today in the business. Where it might be a little bit difficult with LTE is the fact that many MNOs, they like to apply the similar standard as they have for their terrestrial connected sites also over satellite. And in their terrestrial networks, they sometimes use MPLS or lots of VLANs and QNT tags and so forth. And that drives up the packet size a little bit of the packets that needs to be sent over the satellite transport networks. And we move then from the standard size of 1,500 bytes to sometimes up close to 2,000 or just above. That can be a bit challenging for some satellite technologies to adapt to, but as long as you have a satellite solution that can do jumbo frames, you're in pretty good shape for your regular backhaul. And then if we go into trunking and look at the operational requirements there, I mean, those networks pump a lot of bandwidth, obviously, and need high throughput, need acceleration of the TCP and GTP traffic to make it look and feel like a terrestrial network. But also there, jumbo frame can come into the picture as a value to the service provider and the MNO at the end of the day as well, because if you can increase your packet sizes, you reduce the loads on all the routers across the networks, and you also reduce the overhead of all the headers. So if you have a 1 gig link, for instance, that you backhaul, that is not unusual nowadays. I mean, if anyone would have said a few years ago, I'm doing 1 gig of satellite backhaul, people would have their minds blown, but that's pretty standard nowadays. So if you're able to do jumbo frames in that scenario, you save maybe 5 or 6% going from 1,500 bytes to 9,000, 10,000 bytes, and that gives you an additional 60 meg of throughput on that link. So as long as you can meet those requirements, you're in good shape doing satellite backhaul today across any standard. So the KPIs are definitely achievable across the board, even with GEO satellite technologies and TDMA and SCPC alike.
Yeah, Mike, I saw you raise your hand. You got something you want to throw into that?
I agree with everything Richard is saying. I think one of the other challenges, of course, the MNO is, and Richard did mention it, is that the MNO is always trying to push forward the challenge of to meet terrestrial grade key performance integrators and or push their topology over satellite. And that is really the major challenge in technology and operational requirement for a service provider to really mesh their network with the mobile network operator network to make it seem like seamless. They're used to a certain amount or a certain number of key performance indicators, and they prefer to keep it in their format because they don't want to consider satellite as a different means, but rather as one of the many means that they're going across. And to say, and to that point is also that a single solution is highly beneficial, of course, is possible, but highly beneficial to service a complete wide range of different type of customer requirements. And that's another technological challenge, because you have a large number of MNOs which are taking advantage of exactly the bandwidth price declines that you're mentioning, and also monies coming from their USO funds to deploy large ultra-rural sites to actually finally provide capacity to towns under 500 people, for example. And then you have large trunk sites, 100 megabits, and as Richard said, up to a gigabit. So you need really a wide variety of different types of solutions that can to meet all those challenges.
Interesting. Well, so I'll turn over to the service provider standpoint. So, German, you obviously are doing a lot in this business. What do you think are the basic requirements to get started and to be successful?
Sure. A service provider should ensure that have a totally understand of the technologies and the vendors. Vendors has different protocols to interact with the one connectivity, and then must know how to apply the QoS and the ToS to each node according to each technology. So hardware, traffic behavior. So certainly it involves years of learning, and at Access as a service provider, we understand the most important vendors in each operation technology after years of operation with each one. So to define what technology must to start in with that knowledge, and what are the KPIs that you must to serve. I mean, each technology, please understand technology like 2G, 3G, or 4G have a main requirement for latency or for capacity or for QoS. So you must understand what to serve, and then define if you can operate one access method or other one. Of if you can use a teleport in the same country or not. For example, 4G is more flexible to operate with a highest latency than 3G. So you can calculate the scheme of the access method and route of delivery to the aggregator node. Now about the vendors, each vendor has its operation window. So there are vendors like Huawei, Ericsson, ZTE, which requirement for aggressive or sensitive for 3G, so that 3G than others, and it must to be mandatory to design or define what technology to use. Just to explain, if you operate a real 2G jitter, maybe you define a SCPC return or a TDMA with a huge QoS, right?
I'm reminded, but listening to you, as much as this industry changes, one thing about it has never changed in the teleport sector, which is that we're the folks who've got to figure out all this stuff plays together. It depends on us to know more than anybody else about this business. Ron, go ahead.
Yeah, that's what I was just going to say. I agree with everything everybody said. I think it just built up to that point, Robert, is that from the satellite operator or teleport operator standpoint, you see all this different equipment that needs to be known. You look at requirements, it goes from 2G through 5G. I mean, we're answering a bid with a customer that's going from 2G to 3G now. So, I mean, and then you have other customers that want to go 5G. So at the teleport or on over the satellite, you're trying to figure out how do all these still work together? How do you get everything to play together? Because cost is a big issue for everybody. So the knowledge base that you have to have at the teleport, obviously a lot more IT centric people than the old days where everybody was an old RF guy. Now you have a heavy IT presence because of everything that's going on, or a terrestrial circuit knowledge base along with that. So it isn't interesting as things grow. And, like I said, we're looking at a customer going to 3G, and you try to convince them that with the money you're going to spend, why don't you jump to LTE or even look at 5G, because you'll get ahead of the game. But, some people in their countries, they got to look at what they can spend based on what their customer set is. So
yeah, and they got to be able to talk to the right handset. So that's huge. Question from our listeners. This is the classic business question is, okay, so we're seeing, costs for bandwidth go down. So for the operators and the service providers who are reselling bandwidth, ultimately, is that bad because you're talking about potentially a revenue hit, or is it good because you're going to unleash demand? What are any of you seeing so far? And of course, not all of you are in the bandwidth sale business.
I can give the vendor perspective, and then we have a service provider.
You guys are great. As a friend of mine who's a senior executive with a technology vendor said, listen, you got to understand our business. We get paid first. It's great.
Exactly. our stuff needs to come in day one for this to work. So, but no, I think there's significant elasticity in this market, and as prices go down, the amount of available sites to us will increase quite significantly. And we'll also see not only number of sites increase, but we'll also see the traffic increase across those sites, because there is a pent-up demand out there. If you look at any industry analysts that look at how traffic is growing in our networks today, they will point to the fact that over the last 5 years or so, the growth in this networks, in regular terrestrial networks that we're connected to, has been 40 to 50% year over year. And that bandwidth growth is going to happen in parts of the market where satellite comes into play as well, once we can hit the right price point, because we have the technology already in place to deliver these data rates. But it's the price that is the key that is unlocking that demand. And so I see only positive things that is coming with lower prices, in fact.
Yeah, we're going to move on. I think everybody is going to agree with you. I mean, if there's anything we know about telecommunications, is that people always want more.
Yeah.
Always want more. I've never, through good times and bad times. I want to get specific for a moment, just to give people a view of what a satellite backhaul, operation looks like. Could you give us an example of a successful implementation that you've done for an MNO customer? Just the basics of what that looks like, so our audience can understand the business if they don't already know it. Mike, why don't we start with you?
Me?
Yeah.
Okay, good. I think I think a perfect example of the type of deployments we get involved in, we have, I'll highlight two of them in particular. In Africa, we deal with MTN. MTN is a very mature mobile operator, and they have a preference, for example, of owning their own infrastructure and owning their own equipment. And so we work with them to provide custom hub-based solutions and TDMA solutions so that they could deploy their services across whatever services it is, 2G, 3G, which is current, and 4G in the very, very near future, across these satellite solutions. So that's one way of doing it. Another one I'd like to highlight, for example, is that we're working with Omansat in the Middle East, and we're dealing with the mobile operators in Oman. And in that capacity, we're really taking advantage of a multi-purpose, multi-user, multi-tenant type of HTS, multi-beam HTS satellite. And so it really shows the diversity and capability of our solution, because we could provide one hub solution to a satellite service provider, and they could divvy off portions and manage the different KPI, key performance indicators, KPIs, for different customers, be they cellular operators, or be they DSL service providers, or just broadband connect, enterprise broadband connect users. So those are like the type of networks that we deploy. And of course, in most of these networks, it's always important to support the high packet per second rates, all these kind of things that Richard alluded to previously, and maintain, of course, low jitter, high throughput, high efficiency.
Yep. So basically, it's everybody's dream: one box to rule them all.
One box.
Everything. Yeah. Ron, how about you, from the point of view of the teleport operations at ABS?
So we have, as Mike said, we have some of the larger operators just want capacity. So, that's it. You just have to have the right capacity at the right price, et cetera. But more so what we see is like where we have customers in Africa where we'll have the hub platform and bring IP in from, say, Europe into Africa for them to distribute multiple sites throughout a country in Africa. We can run the hub itself and help on the remote end. Most of them distribute themselves on that remote end capacity, whether it's to a base station and go from there, or whether they do internet cafes or whatever the case may be. Basically the same in Asia. We do a lot in that, especially in the islands in the South Pacific and Southeast Asia. We trunk from our teleports in the Philippines into some of those islands and then help them distribute from there. We have microwave links for them, we have et cetera, and they'll come in and distribute from there. So it's basically, what we're going to see. It's in those islands is where fiber's not, or not yet, or even in many cases, fiber has come, but it's so unreliable at this point that, they would still even want to back up primary and use fiber as backup until they're comfortable, or they'll have us back up their connectivity.
Fiber, also known as shark bait.
Yeah.
Interesting, and that's really actually kind of the original internet application for in our industry was trunking, right? And it's still a good business. Chairman, I want to come over to you because again, we'll stay on the service end of this thing. Can you give a successful example from one of your thousands and thousands of implementations?
Yes, sure. Well, at Access, we have several examples. I would perhaps like to tell you about 2 cases in 2 different regions. It is important to clarify here that given the condition of the operational release of the new frequency bands endorsed by the ITU in each country, there are 2 types of node to offer, commercial one and the regulatory one. The commercials are typically those that the MNO operates under premise of growth and from which it profits from greater consumption, right? And the regulatory ones, which the ones that must operate for commitment to connectivity in each country in remote zones where there is not possibility of turning into a commercial scheme. So for North America, the most important MNO in Mexico, for example, operates with access about 100 commercial satellite links with a business case based on consumption per gigabyte and reaching 300 terabytes per month and about 1.4, 1.5 gigabits of pure or dedicated capacity. This is a pretty example of the strongness and reliability of satellite links and in hardest conditions to commercial one cases. And the other case could be in the South America, where emerging operators recently awarded the new spectrum bands, operate with terrestrial networks, and need the satellite for the most remote nodes. In these networks, the commitment with the regulatory entity in each country also has a new variable that it is the speed of implementation, right? Maybe 200 remotes in 2 months, 300 remotes in 5 months. So where the HTA satellite become the best way to operate in Colombia and Chile due to the tight implementation schedules. So definitely solution with the small antennas, allow quick deployments without affecting the KPIs of each MNO. So in these cases, Access has more than 100 sites per country, Chile and Colombia, with bandwidth of around 400 megabits in Colombia and 500 in Chile.
Well, and that's really tough in a region where just getting around can be a challenge to some of your remote locations. Richard, last to you. What implementation story can you tell us?
Well, I'll give you 3 because that's how I like to segment the market. You have the ultra rural greenfield market at the low end of the segment. You have the traditional medium bandwidth segments for the macro sites, and then you have the trunking sites. So first, we are working together with NuRAN, that is a network as a service company, to provide network as a service to Orange in Cameroon. This is an ultra rural deployment. It's deploying 2G, and the MNO is Orange, and this is interesting because Orange is also a satellite service provider. I'll come to that in a second. They chose to buy this as a service because they feel they get better value and better opportunity working with NuRAN, that has then partnered with us for the TDMA network platform that goes into service a few hundred sites in Cameroon. So the requirements here are low cost but very efficient use of the bandwidth, low power consumption because the sites are running off solar power, and this is turning into be a really nice use case for both Orange and Neurons, as the traffic is growing very nicely. But then looking at Orange in other markets in Africa, we also provide them with backhaul solutions, and there they are themselves satellite service provider and have their own teleports. And here they service sites that are more mature. They are macro sites. They serve larger villages. And here they work both with a combination of our dynamic SCPC platform called Heights, as well as some SCPC links to get those high throughput, high quality links that you need to service larger sites. Here you really want to have the highest bandwidth efficiency you can get to be able to serve those massive amounts of data that they are asking for. So Orange is using both the service model, buying from others, as well as run their own services. And I find that quite interesting, depending on how they segment the market. And then finally, trunking then is another story we can tell about here in North America, where I'm at. We have a customer that is using large trunking links to connect remote villages up in northern Canada. And here the bandwidth requirements are quite astonishing. The network is to its largest sites 3.5 gigabits per second of traffic, and these villages are served then with wireless services, LTE, as well as IP services through DSL. And to be able to get to these high throughputs, there's not a single transponder today that can service 3.5 gigabits per second of traffic. So here we have to stitch together capacity from several different transponders using link bonding solutions, and then it looks and feels to the service provider in this community like they're getting a 3.5 gigabit link, even though the capacity is actually distributed over several different transponders. But this goes to show as well that as we see more services coming from MEO and eventually LEO providers as well, wanting to go after the trunking business, there is still a play for the GEO satellite service providers with the right technology to be able to meet those challenges by stitching together capacity and use high performance SCPC link to deliver very high throughput, high performance links at very competitive rates.
Yeah, thank you. That's a nice way to divide up the opportunity. And I think we've seen examples of all of those. Let's talk in the time we have remaining to us a little bit about sort of what's next. I think all of you in your comments have talked about the fact that there's more to go. You know, there's a greater distance to go where we can begin to truly and fully support terrestrial standards on our networks and invest, you know, less and less in specialization to make crazy things work, and more in a sort of a mass-produced kind of solution. So, from a technology standpoint, what are some of the things that you're seeing that you think are either most important coming down the road that you're starting to really explore and think are promising, or that you really wish that you had? Shimon, why don't we start with you, because you're in the you could put new technology to use tomorrow if it was there.
Yeah. It will be a very long answer, but I will try to be very short. So we believe on the cerebral backhaul through satellite on the cruises and vessels will be worldwide adopted. Also, we understand that the low latency solutions through satellite will open the opportunity to operate 5G, and why not 6G with a new window of interoperability. For sure, the cerebral backhaul through satellite will increase in adoption in each one zone according to the release of the new frequency band and the smarts add-on. I understand that the idea for the the solution with the next the new growth opportunities. The release of the new spectral bands, it will be undoubtedly continue bringing growth opportunities in backhaul from the commercial side, and of course the new generation of HTS, including the Ka-band HTS, have enabled provide more capacity with cheapest alternative of terminal leading to serve to higher performance with a low price. For sure, 5G and new connection of delivery of high capacity move forward the industry to a new picture with the UV, HTS, and of course the delivery service through non-geo satellites.
So Ron, what are you seeing? What are the technologies that you have your eye on right now for implementation, or that you hope are coming down the pike to improve your business case?
I think the biggest point is the virtualization aspect. I think that as we go forward and try to become a satellite becoming part of that macro telecom, we have to invest in virtualization so we can become part of that ecosystem. And the big part of that, while it may be easy to virtualize certain things, obviously RF will never be virtualized, the actual antenna, etc. But everything behind that, as companies come up and try to work interoperably with the terrestrial side and amongst each other, we all know this in the satellite industry. We talk about the ground guys not necessarily interoperable. They all have their special sauce, etc. I think as things are virtualized and some of the applications that will be on there needs to be more of the interoperability amongst, so people can just spin up, this or spin up that without saying, okay, I got one vendor here and I got to make sure all the remotes do that, and I got to make sure. I think having that interoperability. I hate to use the word standards because everybody come up with standards. We do have standards. Multiple vendors can say they're interoperable, and to some extent they are, but I would say hub operators typically are not. So I think as things get virtualized on the hub side, it's quite helpful. And then obviously on the remote side, I think to bring things, as you mentioned early on, that's in the report, that to hold down that cost in remote locations where you just have a off-the-shelf server that you can load software on, connected up to a satellite dish and a buck, and away you go. I think that, to me, is really, we go back to that opening up conversation in the last topic. I think that will open up quite a bit for people to gain access to internet connectivity. I think as cheap as it is now, you have Ka-band, people are still struggling with Ka-band. They get high throughput until the rains come. And a lot of them are putting C-band, backup links in there for now. And obviously, as the frequencies are filled up from a satellite operator standpoint, now we're looking past that. Now you look to Q and V. And obviously, if rain's affecting Ka, it's going to kill Q and V. So we need to, on the ground, also, I think, look at how we do, just to sum that up, back into the macro telecom, and virtualization, I think, is going to be the best way to go.
German, you referred to latency in terms of the LEO operators. One of the questions from our audience has been, how exactly do we deal currently in the geo environment with latency? And of course, you referenced some TCP acceleration and so forth. Are there any other technology advances you see that are helping with that problem? We have a question ask a question for anybody. Yeah, Mike. You're on mute right now. There you go.
Apologies.
I'm sorry. So were you raising your hand, or were you just scratching your nose? You can never,
No, I was actually PEPIT, performance enhancement proxy, is one of my favorite subjects. So I love to always jump in on that. There's a great amount of work. Performance enhancement proxy, without any hesitation, I say it works. Okay, let's just say it works well. It does what it's supposed to do. The thing is that it was designed for a time of the market where older protocols were running over older TCP stacks, over older web generations, et cetera, et cetera. And today, well, even these TCP accelerations do not provide the same benefit as they did, say, 7 or 8 years ago. Okay, so there's always a technology challenge there. Will this continue becoming a trend? Will there be greater move toward HTTP3, which of course doesn't require any PEP whatsoever? Or will the markets move a different way? So, there's a lot to be said about PEP and how it benefits the user experience over satellite, especially on high delay links. And right now, it is providing a need for some niche markets, but I think that the industry itself, the web industry and the new world cloud industry is moving beyond that, and PEP may become something that in the long run may disappear. That's my comment on that.
Yeah, it's interesting. Thank you. Good point of view. I want to just step back for a moment and talk about this intersection of technology and the business, because MNOs are famously price sensitive, and we're all working like crazy to get down into the zone where it's a no-brainer decision for them to do satellite backhaul. And the regions in which we can do it will gradually expand because the economics look good. But how can service providers, with the help of their technology partners, go a little bit beyond that, not just be in a price war, but to create lasting relationships with MNOs where they're delivering a lot of extra value?
Yes, it's a good question. It's a good question because this is a reality. Now, the new technologies not only have configured the reduction on the terminal size or more bandwidth, but also have contributed to reduce the gap on the price raise. Now, beyond the capacity and the price, we are convinced that new attribute to add value generation will create a lasting relationship. Operators and integrators should not a transportation connectivity company anymore. If we think on an integrated monitoring network on the cellular backhaul, where the solution can identify packets of voice from data separately and predict the traffic behavior from 3G and 4G at the same provider, we can provide add value to them. Currently at Access, we offer many alternatives of smart monitoring, and we are working on the traffic behavior prediction that support to the MNO to distribute their bandwidth better on the regulatory side, because the budgets, specifically on the regulatory ones, are very small. So the solution, more than price raise, with the new technologies, it makes sense for them, but we need to move forward to a new scenario of the solution, and it's the smart connectivity add-on.
So, Richard, turning to you, how can smart connectivity become part of your skill set that you can in turn bring to service providers?
Yes. Oh, go ahead, Richard. Go ahead.
That was a question for you, Richard. Sorry if that wasn't clear.
Oh, sorry. I think one of the key values a service provider can add to the equation is their system integration and operational knowledge of running a satellite network and running different satellite technologies and stitch them together into one seamless solution for the MNO. Very few MNOs today has in-house satellite capabilities.
Sure.
And they need someone that they can trust and advise them and hold their hand as they go along. And at the end of the day, if you provide a good, valuable service, you enable the MNO to open up new markets and run those services profitable. And that is really, at the end of the day, how you build that lasting relationship. Unless they can get to a profitable business that they can run sustainably, you won't have a business. So the best service providers I've come in contact with and seen be successful in this market takes that proactive approach with their customers and constantly work with them through this change, because an MNO network is never static. They may start out with an RFP process saying that I need 100 sites and they each need 5 megabits each, and off you go to deploy. But the first site that comes up will look different. The second site will look different. The third and the fourth. And this network will evolve as customers change their behaviors out at the remote site. So it's important for the service provider and teleport operator to constantly be on top of that, monitoring what's going on and advise and help the MNO so they get the best value out of the bandwidth that they're buying. And
Which
that's
comes back to Germán's opening point. I'm sorry, it comes back to Germán's opening point, which is you really have to understand the technologies extremely well. Mike, you were raising your hand.
Yeah, it was just that the MNOs today, like their primary business is really to manage their operations and end user subscribers. That's really what they should really be focusing on. And in many cases, in most of the world, I would say that they pushed off the management of networking to other companies or completely third-party organizations. And that way they don't have to focus on it. They just send them, I want a eNode B here and I want an eNode B there, and those service providers will make it happen. And under either a payment contract or a revenue share for the networking infrastructure. And now I wanted to get to this revenue sharing thing because that's where lasting relationships are born. Because basically, like we mentioned, ultra rural as being, it has the most challenging revenue profile. There's no question about that. And satellite service providers looking long term and will have to look to see how can they work in a partnership with an MNO to lay some seeds down and then get additional benefits as these seeds grow into larger capacity links. Okay, but there's definitely that kind of thing that has to happen in the long run. I see even today a lot of MNOs are looking for us to say, well, we want to do a revenue share on deployments, and you know, we're working with them and trying to see if the business cases work out for both parties. And so that's something that I would like to ask Germán if he's seeing himself.
Everything old is new again. That's a very old strategy for starting up satellite service.
Yeah.
Germán, do you have any comment on that?
Is that?
Well, actually, you know, yeah, except he doesn't really want to offer it, so it's fine.
No, I agree with that. And I really agree with, you know, what Richard was saying. And I think it goes back to the point I spoke about earlier with the virtualization, is that the satellite operators and teleport operators, we need to become transparent in that ecosystem. And I think that's how you build that relationship. You don't just go in there selling capacity. You need to understand their business. You need to have the knowledge base so you can understand that growth. You don't know where it's going to go, but if you don't have that open conversation and just say, I want X megahertz today, it does nothing for you. In the end, you need to work closely with them. I think we've talked about this for a long time in this industry. It's the thing that satellite operators need to do. They need to take a different view with these MNOs if we want to go ahead and become transparent. Look, every MNO, they have deals with other MNOs as they share their capacity, and whether it's terrestrial or not. And the satellite operator has to look at that business case on more of an OU basis rather than, you know, oh, I'm going to sell you a fixed X number of megahertz and that's the way it's going to be. It just needs to be available that when they're looking for capacity at any point, you know, again, they could have fiber, but the fiber's down. They don't want to say, okay, what's my backup strategy? Call the satellite operator, et cetera. This needs to happen autonomously. So we just need to build ourselves into their ecosystem somehow. And I think that's how we will build those lasting relationships and grow with them.
Well, I think we're going to, on that note, we have to leave it because we're running out of time. Unfortunately, this has been a very, very interesting discussion with all of you. Yeah, our industry is learning at light speed right now, literally at light speed. And it's probably the most exciting as well as the most stressful time that I can remember in all of my years working in this industry. So I want to thank very, very much Ron, Mike, Germain, and Richard for sharing their knowledge and their points of view on this. It's been great having you, and we look forward to having you having you on another webinar in the future. I unfortunately, believe it or not, have to step away to get onto another event, but I'm going to leave you in the good hands of Randall Barney. Randy, over to you.
Great, thank you, Robert. And yes, thank you to all our panelists and thank you to our attendees for joining us today. Coming up, I'll be at CABSAT next week. If you are attending and would like to meet, send me an email, rbarney@worldteleport.org. I'll also be at the Asia Tech X Summit, aka Communicasia, follow in June, and we'll be at IBC in September. Reports coming up, we have the pros and cons of the Leo Gateway business coming out at the end of this month. And in September, right before IBC, It's Alive, how broadcast via satellite adapts to market demands. And again, thank you all for your attendance, and thank you. We'll see you soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Good seeing you all. See you later.
Thank you. Bye.